Hi everybody. To end our study of interest groups, we are going to look at different types of interest groups. As always, please make sure that you're recording notes in your packet as you watch, filling in the blanks, also using that right column to add any additional notes, and to also make a note of any questions that you might want to ask when we're back together in class. So to begin with, there are four major and distinct types of interest groups: economic interests, environmental interests, equality interests, and consumer and other public interest lobbies. So we're going to look through each of these piece by piece. Now, economic interests we're actually going to further subdivide into two categories: labor and business. So economic interests as a whole are dealing with business, labor, farm interests, taxes, subsidies, regulations. Looking from the labor side of things, labor represent workers. So labor interests are oftentimes referred to as unions. They represent workers and they have more members than any other group except for the AARP, which is the Association of Retired People. There are 14 million members of the AFL-CIO, which is the nation's largest labor union. Now, even though that's a good chunk of money, or a good chunk of members, only 12% of workers actually belong to unions, and that number is actually decreased from 33% in 1956. Now, the question over unions and collective bargaining rights, these are things that have come to the forefront, even in our own state. When just about 10 years ago, we had the passage of Act 10, where in the picture here, you see people protesting in our state capitol building when there was a law passed that took the protection of collective bargaining rights away from workers. There's also this discussion across the country happening in various states over whether states should be closed shop states, which means that in order to work somewhere, union membership is mandatory, or a right to work state where it's illegal, actually forbidden, for unions to require membership to be able to work somewhere. Now, business interests are some of the most wealthiest and powerful lobbying groups out there. More than half of permanent organizations, lobbying interest groups with offices in DC are business associations, and 70% of all reported lobbying expenditures are coming from business interests. So business interests dominate lobbying, they dominate PAC spending. A PAC stands for Political Action Committee. We'll talk about that more in our next unit. But business PACs outspend labor PACs 12-1 in the 2012 election, and that's generally a trend that we see overall. And a lot of times these PACs have heavily Republican donors, but more so we see that they tend to support the party in power because they want access to whoever has the power in government at that time. PAC contributions, lobbying efforts are intended to get access and have influence on the policymaking process. And we can see that there's a major link between industry donations and congressional voting patterns. But I think it's important to recognize that business interests are not monolithic. That means that they're not all the same. Businesses have very diverse interests. There are policy differences and preferences among industries, and all businesses, though, are profit-driven. So they're going to support the party in power because that will help them profit overall. So this chart here is just looking at PAC spending by corporations in each 2-year election cycle that went to Republican candidates in the House of Representatives. So you can see any bar that is blue means that the Democrats were in control of the House at that time, and then any line that's red means Republicans were in control. And you can see that in years that the Democrats are in control, Republican spending goes down a bit because they're going to give money to Democrats because they want, again, that access and that representation. Environmental interests. These are interest groups that organize to look at climate and environmental issues. The first one was the Sierra Club. It's the oldest environmental group, and many more have been founded and organized since 1970 when there was a push for environmentalism and looking at actions and steps to protect the environment. Today, there are more than 10,000 groups with almost $3 billion in revenue that they can use on lobbying and other grassroots efforts. And they do have a profound policy impact. They may not have the membership, but their numbers, the membership to rival, for instance, business PACs and interest groups, but they are influential due to their numbers. There's a strong, committed base of supporters there, even if they don't have a lot of money. Equality interests are interest groups that are looking to guarantee 14th Amendment protections of due process and the Equal Protection Clause. They organize to protect and represent minority interests in society. The NAACP is the National Association for Colored People, one of the oldest equality interest groups that's been around since the early 1900s. They use the courts predominantly to fight for enforcement and equality. For instance, the NAACP got a major win in the Brown versus Board of Education case of 1954, which overturned the separate but equal doctrine. And they'll also advocate for social welfare policies, and that's the big focus of those types of groups today. For women, one of the big interest groups that represents women is NOW, which is the National Organization for Women. Their top priority has been for a long time now getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed and added to the Constitution, which would guarantee the constitutional, political, and legal equality of men and women. And then we have consumer and public interest lobbies. Consumer lobbies are going to pursue policies that will benefit everybody. Same with public interest lobbies. They represent broad classes of people like consumers, voters, reformers. But the difficulty here is that these are not overly popular groups to join. They don't have a lot of members because since their outcomes are things that are going to benefit everyone, there's kind of this free rider problem where people don't need to join because they're going to be able to benefit from what these groups achieve anyway. So these are usually interests that aren't very well funded and low on members. And then there's also the debate about what the public interest actually is. All of these groups think they know, but sometimes these groups are actually trying to impose their views on others. And then just some other smaller types of interest groups. We have what are called intergovernmental interests. So these are bringing members of different government levels together, like the National Governors Association, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. States, through these interests, try to lobby to get grants and get that federal money that we've talked about. We have professional associations that band and lobby together, like the American Bar Association for lawyers, American Medical Association for doctors. And then we have what are called ideological or single issue groups. So ideological groups pursue either liberal or conservative interests or agendas, like something called the ACLJ. And then single interest groups are appealing to interests and beliefs on a single cause, like the NRA, the National Rifle Association, or the AARP, the American Association of Retired People, or the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, looking to protect and preserve our civil liberties. So as we wrap up here, just some questions to consider. Pluralism. Does pluralism prevail in society? Do opposing interests contradict and counteract each other? Pluralism would say yes, that there are a growing number of interest groups, meaning more competition, more variety. It's harder for any one group to control the conversation. But what about interest group corruption? What about elite theory? There are some big interest groups with lots of money who do dominate the system. That kind of goes into that elite theory that we talked about. Wealthy groups do tend to dominate the conversation. And does that corrupt the democratic process? And finally, gridlock. Hyperpluralism. Are there too many interests that it makes it harder to actually accomplish anything? Gridlock, meaning that we can't really see the evidence of any major policy changes. All right, that's where we're going to leave off. Again, if you have any questions from today's lecture, make sure you ask them at the start of class tomorrow.